Acacia Haze is a Sherwin-Williams color that's sort of this medium green with some cool slate gray energy, and I'm all for it. It was requested by one of my viewers. Apparently we have a lot of Sherwin-Williams fan people watching, which is fine by me because I do love their colors as well. What we're gonna do today in this episode of Color Quickie is we're gonna break this color down. I'll give you some technical stuff that's kind of important to know. I'm also gonna give you some practical information on how to use it and an entire color palette at the end so you can start decorating your home like a professional or a semi-professional or a YouTuber. You like that intro? Show me by pressing that like button. Always helps. So it seems that we as people are okay with using color again in the paint world. And that's music to my little ears because I enjoy color. I don't have a ton against neutrals and those desaturated colors, but when we can experiment with more options, more hues, more vibrancy, I think that's always a good thing because it gives us a chance to flex our creative muscle. What's great about Acacia Haze is it's clearly a color. It's very colorful, but it's not too daunting, I think, for the people that are afraid of color. And that's because it's sort of toned down with some gray to make it feel a little more accessible to the average person. It has this muted feeling to it, but still contains enough saturation for it to be pronounced. Really great sense of balance, which as a Libra, I'm all for that. In terms of technical information, the big technical thing is the LRV, which is the light reflectance value. This is a 0 to 100 lightness score that tells us the percentage of light that a color reflects. And the more light it reflects, the lighter it's going to be. Acacia Haze scores a 32 out of 100, which means it's in the bottom third in terms of lightness value. So it's kind of a darker color, but not as dark as black or even like a dark navy blue. It almost feels like a darker mid-tone color in practical use. And the more light you throw at it, the less you'll notice how dark it actually is. Now, like I said earlier, this is a kind of cool leaning mid-tone green. I wouldn't go so far to call it like teal or aquamarine or anything. It's in the green family, but it does have that cool blue undertone to it, which does cool it down a little bit. Now, because of that, if you have a room that has a lot of cold lighting, if you're a fan of fluorescence or those bright LED lights, or if you're in a north-facing room that gets a lot of indirect but bright light, it could cool the color down and then it may look more blue than you think. And guess what? The way you figure that out, you just test your colors, okay? Always test your colors. But overall, I really like this color. I just love this category of colors. Obviously, green is like one of my favorites, but the cooler sort of mid-tony greens, they can do a lot, I feel. They can be a great secondary color in a color palette, so not necessarily the main color that you'll throw everywhere. It's dark enough to be impactful, but light enough to be pleasant and kind of easy to work with. So you don't need to limit it to a powder room. You can use it in bedrooms. You can use it in a living room if you wanted to, dining room. There's a lot you can do here, but there's a lot more you can do with more colors. Let's get to the color palette, starting with 3 color pairings that you can use on the rest of your walls, or even just in your furnishings and your accents and accessories. The first color we'll look at is called Rice Grain, and you might think this is just kind of a white color. It's sort of an off-white, I guess you could say. It's lighter for sure. It's sitting at a 64 LRV, and compared to Acacia Haze, that's like double the lightness. So a much brighter color. And you have this creamy yellow aspect that makes it extremely exciting and energetic. I do feel that the undertone has a bit of a ochre sort of bronze lean to it. So it's not necessarily a pure kind of dandelion yellow. It has that sort of earthiness to it. You could sort of see it as having a bit of a beige quality as well. In some occasions, there may be a very faint greeny gold undertone, but with Acacia Haze, you already have that green in there too, so they will fit together nicely, although on opposite ends of the spectrum, because you have cold and warm colors coming together. That bit of green is sort of the common denominator between the two. Now, even with that sort of shared thing, I don't necessarily think I would have both of these in the same space heavy-handedly. If you are going to use them both in one room, just have one as the predominant color and then the other as the supportive color. So used much less. If they're in separate rooms, then you're all good. Next is Realist Beige. And when I first saw this color, I read it as, this beige is the realist. It's the most real beige. It's a beige for realists. I get it, okay? Now, what's interesting about this compared to the last color is, even though it's beige as well, it looks quite different. It's more of a brown forward beige. There's really little to no visible yellow in this one, and what you end up getting with that light brown is almost this sort of pinky quality without being pink.
I beg your pardon?
And I think that's really accentuated next to these other colors. That's kind of what I wanted to go for here. Another light, warm neutral, similar lightness to rice grain, but it just gives you a different feel, a different aesthetic overall. And I really think depending on the furnishings in the space you're using it in, one is gonna look better than the other. Basically, one is just more gold, yellow leaning, and the other is a little more browny, kind of light milk chocolate leaning, like really light. Almost like an ice cap if you're a Tim Hortons fan. The third color is an accent color, but I don't think it's as dramatic as some of the other colors I chose in previous palettes. It is more in line with Acacia Haze, the main color of this video. It's called Night Owl. And as you can see, it's another kind of slightly cool green, a little bit toned down, a bit shaded. This one is going to feel quite a bit deeper and darker though. It's a 13 LRV. So if you're using this in a room that doesn't get a lot of light, it may seem like an off black. That's so dark and rich it is. And it does have this very slight cyan undertone that can appear from time to time, almost giving it a chameleon effect, which I think is fun. Some people don't like that. Some people like their colors to be predictable, but I enjoy the ambiguity of certain colors because they can evolve and change throughout the day in really interesting ways. And this color does that. Also, because it is so tied to Acacia Haze, you can use it more often within your home because essentially you're working with a mid-tone and a dark green. Sometimes when you're working with less hues or less colors overall, it gives you a little more freedom to experiment in different rooms. If I gave you a magenta for my last color, maybe you wouldn't use it at all. Or if you did, maybe the kids' room or something. But with a color like Night Owl, maybe you'll be more inclined to not only have this in your bedroom, but as an accent ceiling color in your powder room, and maybe an accent wall color in your dining room. And also, fun fact, Sherwin-Williams describes it as a neutral. So go for it. Just use it. Wall colors are out of the way. Now we have to talk about trim colors. Yes, those baseboards, they need to be painted too. Don't ignore them. No paint job is complete without the trim. And typically speaking, maybe 68.2% of people will immediately go for a light trim color, typically a white. That wasn't a real metric, by the way, I'm just estimating. I picked Spare White because it does have this very, very slight green tinge that is barely noticeable, especially on baseboards, but it's great to really tie into the two greens that we talked about earlier. And it's also subtle enough that it's not going to really aggressively clash against the other beige leaning colors. One thing is Spare White and Realist Beige might feel a little complementary because of the touch of red in that brown aspect, that sort of pinky quality we touched on. But I really like the interaction. It may not be for everyone, so just caution, be cautious. The dark trim color is really fun. This is the 2021 color of the year by Sherwin-Williams. It's Urbane Bronze. And like rice grain, which also has that sort of golden aspect in the background, so does this color. But clearly, it's a very, very dark brown with that sort of ochre, bronzy aspect that I think is absolutely gorgeous. This is a great color if you want dark baseboards, dark trim, or if you want to isolate your dark doors. I see that all the time too. And of course, you can use it as a wall color, and there's plenty of stuff online for inspiration that you can check. That usually happens with colors of the year. Still a super relevant color today. Here's the palette all together. Let me know what you think. I gotta know. And we got more colors, more palettes, more fun videos right over here. If you're still here, I love you. If you want to support us even more than you already do, consider clicking that join button to become a monthly channel member for the price of a cup of cream. I don't know who would drink a cup of cream. That's weird.